He's one of the 12. Intimate friend of Christ. So intimate with Jesus that even after Jesus said, the one who I did this and handed to, he's the one that would betray me. Jesus having done that, the disciples still didn't know who it was. Because in their minds, they must have thought it couldn't be Judas. Judas, constantly at the feet of Jesus, constantly listening to Jesus, observing Jesus, participating in the work of Christ, an active member of the 12, trusted with the money.
I wouldn't do it now.
It's the betrayer. How could that be? How could one who stands so close to the heat of the power of God, how could he be the one to turn and attempt to extinguish that flame? J.C. Ryle says it's because the same fire that melts wax will harden clay. There's an extreme danger, and people don't realize the danger. There's an extreme danger to being proximate to the things of God without believing in the one whom God sent. The same fire that melts wax and melts the heart that turns and follows Jesus. The same fire that calls people to believe in Him. The same fire that draws people to leave their lives to follow Jesus and turn their back on the world to follow Jesus. The same fire that melts their heart will harden another heart. Judas was close in proximity to Jesus, but it seems he never knew Jesus. And so the disciple becomes the betrayer. He leads them to Jesus. We know from the synoptics that he gives Jesus away by kissing him on the cheek. But Jesus says, I told you who I am. I told you that I am He. Again, He repeats, I told you that I am. Just says His name again. You're looking for Jesus. You came to find Jesus. You found God in the flesh. But if you're looking for me, let these guys go. Let these 12 go. Well, now there's just 11. Let them go. John says he said this to fulfill that he wasn't going to lose any of the ones that were his. And you think, well, did he just mean physically? Like, was he just trying to deliver them from physical danger? But think about it. How fragile were these disciples? I mean, one's now betrayed him. We're going to keep reading in just a minute, and don't let that scare you. But another one, the closest one, is going to deny him. I mean, how fragile were they? So if they were to be arrested, if they were to be taken in, how many of them would have persevered through that? We don't know. We don't have to wonder because Jesus protected them. So even in his moment of danger, Jesus' concern was for those who would believe in him. That never ended. On the cross, his concern was for his mother and for the Apostle John. On the cross, his concern was for those who were putting him to death. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Jesus never, throughout his life, a part of his intentional plan, he never concerned himself with his own well-being. Foxes have holes and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. So here they come to arrest Jesus, to take him, to put him to death. He knows all that is happening to him, and he says, take me, but let these guys go. He knew that them taking him was for everyone's good. But there was no good that would come at this point for these disciples where they were taken. So Peter's there. Thank goodness for Peter. Thank goodness for the disciples. Peter's there and he has a sword. It's called a sword. Most likely it's just a knife. There's not a lot of distinction between like a long sword and a medium sword and a shorter sword in these Greek language. But most likely Peter's not carrying around a long sword. It doesn't make sense for one thing. It's just completely impractical. And you would think the others would have noticed and go like, hey, Peter, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? We're going to pray, and you're carrying the rifle. You don't have a handgun available. What are you doing? So it's like Peter, whatever he has, he pulls it out, and John's very specific. He pulls it out, he cuts off a man's right ear, and then he tells us the name of the man. He's going to tell us this man's name again in just a minute. Now this is interesting that in the Synoptic Gospels, that is Matthew, Mark, and Luke, none of those three tell us that it was Peter who cut off the ear of the man. So can you imagine being Peter, and John's Gospel finally comes out, in his bookshelf store, the store bookshelves, he runs to get the copy, first edition, he opens up John's Gospel, and he's like, John, what are you doing, man? Like, Matthew didn't sell me out, Mark let it go, Luke, I didn't tell him, I didn't even tell him it was me. John, you sold me out, man. Why couldn't you just left it like they did? One of the disciples did it. And John's like, no, it was Peter. Peter cut his ear off. The guy's name was Malchus. It was his right ear. Go check it out. That's what John's doing here. Go find Malchus. This happened, people. We know from the Synoptics, John didn't even tell us that Jesus put it back. He's like, you got to see Malchus's ear. Go find him. It was Peter who did it. And Jesus said to Peter, in the Synoptics, Jesus says to Peter, those who live by the sword, die by the sword. But John says, he says something else. Also, he says, put your sword away. Am I not to drink the cup the Father has given me? John's intent in writing this the way he does is to make you see that Jesus is doing this on purpose. This is why it's coming. Peter, you think your little knife is going to subvert the plan of God? And I think a lot of us, especially in our situation culturally, I think we find ourselves in Peter's shoes. We feel like we need to defend Jesus. Like they're coming for our Jesus. They're coming for him. They're coming for him from every different direction in all different ways. They're coming for our Jesus. So we've all got our little bitty knives out. And we're cutting off the ears, trying to protect our Jesus. We've got to keep Jesus safe. And Jesus is saying to all of us, put your swords away. Just like he told Peter, for one thing, if you live by the sword, you'll die by it. But secondly, Jesus is saying to him, I don't need you to defend me. I just knocked them down on their rear ends by saying my name. If I wanted to go to heaven right now, I would. I don't need your defense. I don't need you to defend me. Peter, don't defend me. Believe me. I'm not saying we are to defend our faith. In fact, we know for sure that we are always to be prepared to give a defense for the hope that is within us. I'm not saying you don't try to know more and discern more and learn more so that you can have a faith that is both in your heart and in your mind. We know that the transformation of our lives is through the transformation of our mind. We see that in Romans 12. I'm not saying to be an ignorant follower of Jesus. I'm saying that your purpose in this life is not to defend Jesus, it is to follow Jesus. So put your swords away. Verse 12, it says, Then the company of soldiers, the commander, and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus and tied him up. At first they led him to Annas, since he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who advised the Jews that it would be better for one man to die for the people. John's reminding us of a detail that he told us, that Caiaphas said earlier. He tells us about Annas because Annas was actually deposed by the Roman government. One of the ones who deposed Annas was Pilate. And even though Annas was no longer the high priest, everyone still looked at Annas as the high priest. So they take Jesus to Annas. But Caiaphas, his son, is actually the one serving as high priest, so then they eventually take him to Caiaphas also. So Jesus now begins this progression of trial by night. Verse 15, Simon Peter was following Jesus, as was another disciple. And that disciple was an acquaintance of the high priest, so he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter remained standing outside by the door, so the other disciple, the one known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the girl who was the doorkeeper and brought Peter in. And the servant girl, who was the doorkeeper, said to Peter, "You aren't one of this man's disciples too, are you?" "I am not," he said. Now the servants and officials had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing there warming themselves. Peter was standing with them, warming himself. The high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. "I've spoken openly to the world," Jesus answered him. "I've always taught in the synagogue and in the temple where all the Jews congregate, and I haven't spoken anything in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who heard what I told them. Look, they know what I said." When he said these things, one of the officials standing by slapped Jesus, saying, "Is this the way you answer the high priest?" "If I have spoken wrongly," Jesus answered him, "give evidence. Give evidence about the wrong, but if rightly, why do you hit me?" And Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. And they said to him, "You aren't one of his disciples too, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, said, "Didn't I see you with him in the garden?" Peter denied it again. Immediately the rooster crowed. What a difference a few moments made in Peter. Where did the hero go from before? The sword drawn, slashing ears. Now he's afraid of a servant girl around the fire. I think this is metaphorical in one sense. Those who are quickest to draw the swords are really the most afraid. I think you see fear in both acts. I think that is one of the reasons why Jesus rebuked Peter. His fear was testified to in his desperate attempt to cut Jesus free, but it was even more overtly displayed in his 3-time denial of Jesus, within earshot of the Savior himself. We know it from one of the other Gospels that the third denial that Jesus looked at Peter. You're all further than 6 feet away, you're safe. But John does something here that is so amazing. So he puts Peter's denial sandwiched around Jesus' affirmation of himself. So here's Peter walking around in secret, denying that he even knows Jesus, denying that he's one of the disciples of Jesus. And here's Jesus on trial for his life. All he has to do is deny who he was and say that he made a mistake. That's all he has to do. But Jesus says, everything I've done in the open. Ask anybody what I've taught and they'll tell you. I don't have anything to hide from you. And so then he's hit by a man. And notice that even though Jesus teaches us to turn the other cheek, he doesn't mean just be a wimp and a coward and just like, oh, you hit me there, hit me here. Jesus answers the man and says, why did you hit me? Not out of spite, not out of with a vindictive heart, but just in a quest for truth. Did you have any reason to hit me? If you have something against me, then give evidence for what you have against me. Otherwise, don't hit me. Jesus says, everything I've done is in the open, while his disciples cower in fear. How could this be? How could it happen this way? How does Jesus end up all alone? Betrayed by one, denied by another, the rest have all disappeared. Stands alone. He stands boldly before his judges and says, I have nothing to hide from you. Everything I've done open for the world to see. How could this be? It's because this is why Jesus came. Now, he was born in a remote place with just a few animals and an insignificant family, but not so that it would be kept secret. In fact, he was born in that way so that it would be known that this was the Messiah. And as soon as he was born, it was made known. It was made known to the shepherds, and then by the shepherds to many others. It was made known to kings far away. Even kings close by knew Jesus' death, not death, his birth. They tried to put him to death. He ran, so then it was known in faraway places. He came back. He grew in wisdom and in stature, and as soon as he was ready, he began his public ministry. He made himself known to everyone. He did not hide who he was or why he came. Everything he did, he says, I did it in the open. Jesus came, he was born, so that he would be known. When it came time for him to be tried, he had nothing to hide. Because Jesus was openly God in the flesh, come to redeem the world. He came to save anyone who will believe in him. And that includes you, if you will put your faith in him. If you've never believed in Jesus, what's to prevent you from believing in him today? This is the reason he came. He lived his life intentionally to save those who would believe. Believe in the Lord Jesus today. What about for those of us who have believed? There's a lot to fear. There's a lot to be afraid of right now. You know, we all by now have friends or family who have had COVID and it's been really bad. We know a lot of people who've had COVID and it hasn't done much, but by now we know at least someone who's died from it and someone else who's had really bad consequences. It is justifiable to fear that you may get this disease and die. Politically, we have a lot to fear. It seems like if things go the way that it looks, based on all these appointments, our next president is not going to be our biggest fan. He won't be a fan of those who faithfully preach the gospel, the word of God as it's written. We could easily be in fear of what is to come. Add to that just the basic fears that we all have of everyday life. What about my next paycheck? What about my health? What about my kids? What about my car? What about my job? It's raining outside. What about my roof? So much to fear. Jesus came so that you would not have to live in fear. And Peter realized this later. I mean, none of the disciples understood until after the resurrection, but once Jesus was raised, there's a dramatic change in the disciples. The disciples who ran in fear, Peter who denied Jesus 3 times, now refuses to deny Jesus even when it's time for his own crucifixion. The Spirit of God changed their hearts and lives. That is the main thing that happened to them. They were changed by God himself. But what changed in them? They realized that Jesus does not need defenders. He is executing his plan. Jesus will come to pass. No power ever imagined can stop it. He doesn't need you to defend him by cutting off ears. Jesus, he wants followers. He wants followers. So which will you be? Will you boldly follow Jesus? Would you follow him into this trial? Would you be able to say, if you were put on trial for following Jesus, would you be able to say, everything I've done openly? You got evidence against me presented. I've got nothing to hide. In fact, my life has been lived so that you would know that I'm a follower of Jesus, that he's the only way you can be saved. Not only have I not hidden it, this is the reason that I'm living, so that people would know Jesus. I pray that would be said of me and of this church. Let's be slower with the sword and quicker to follow the one who came to save us. Let's pray. Father, I thank you that you lived out your will for coming, that in your birth, your life, your death and resurrection, everything that happened was according to your perfect plan. You never worried or wondered. There was no fear or anxiety as to what would be the outcome. But you intentionally walked step by step all the way to the cross to save those who were unfaithful. And in saving them, you took the unfaithful and you have made us faithful. Faithful followers of the Son of God who lives and who's coming again. And God, we look forward to your coming. And as we wait for you to come, I pray that we would live our lives of faith in the open. That we would have nothing to hide. We would not have hidden agendas surrounding ourselves with meaningless things, but that there would be no evidence that says we are not followers of Jesus. And if anyone could find it, let them present it. God, I pray that we would openly follow you, turning back away from the fear that would cause us to denial. We are followers of Jesus. I pray that this will be evident in my life. I pray that this would be evident in this church, that this community would know that these are people who follow Jesus. They follow him openly. Wherever he leads, they will go. And I pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's stand together.
Turn your eyes upon Jesus, beholding his wonderful face, and the things on earth will grow strangely in the light of his glory and grace. Turn your eyes to the hillside, where justice and mercy and grace. There the Son of God gave his life for us, and our measureless debt was erased. Jesus, to you we lift our eyes. Jesus, our glory and our turn our eyes to you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on a rainy day. First, you sixth graders, your party's about to start, so I know you're excited. I'm excited for y'all. Everybody else, I don't know if you have a party to get to or not, but if you do, I hope it's great and right. But we're going to sing on our way out. You are all dismissed, and we'll see you again next time.